Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest installment of Playform Studios Artist Talks. Playform is a no-code AI for creative people, and through Playform Studio, we invest in emerging artists that are defining the future of art. Today, we're excited to showcase our most recent artist in residence for the month of December, Anthromorph. Anthromorph is a multidimensional artist best known for the work that she shares via Instagram. Through social media, Anthromorph shares an amalgamation of fantasy, biology, and digital intervention. We're really excited to have all of you join us today. And if you have any questions, please enter them into the chat. We'll be answering them during the second half of the talk. Also, you can check out the exhibition Unnatural Selections AI Portraits by going to playform.io/anthromorph. We'll be sharing the URL in the chat as well, so you can go in there and click on it. So now let's turn our attention to the artist, Anthromorph. Welcome, Anthromorph.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to talk to you today. And, it's really great to see so many of your fans are able to join us. And I'm sure we have some Playform artists in the room as well. So, just to get things started, I wanted to have you introduce yourself and, explain to us who is Anthromorph?
So Anthromorph is a concept body identity that I have created. And it kind of came out of the way that I saw the self as something that isn't really separate or like a fixed identity, but I saw the human as something that is like we are just like bodies in the shape of a human rather than a fixed identity.
So throughout your art practice, from the early beginnings, you've hidden your face, and you've mentioned in a previous conversation we've had that as a kid you used to draw pictures without faces. So what is it about hiding the face that is so integral to your work, and how do you think that you use that to express yourself?
So I think a lot of my work came from my need to kind of escape my skin or this like from a feeling of dysphoria and discomfort, which I didn't really know how to translate because I didn't really have the awareness that I could be something more than what I was made to socialize as from like society. So I think instinctively I was craving to become this other thing that human rules couldn't really be attached to it. And for me, nature was always a place of like a very safe space because queer people, when you're in nature, no one can really like judge you or shame you for anything. You're just a form moving around. So I think the face was my main trigger always, and transcending it would give me the most euphoria, let's say, and combining it with nature and becoming this like hybrid animal form. It was almost like a need for me to associate myself with elements that I found beautiful.
And it's just so wonderful how you've been able to use your art as therapy. I think that's been the case for a lot of artists. And so, that brings me to your latest exhibition, Unnatural Selections, AI Portraits. And in this work, in collaboration with Playform, you've incorporated a lot of different methods, and just really broken down your process to incorporate things like your handmade masks. Photography was involved, as well as digital manipulation. Everyone can see the final artworks now at playform.io/anthromorph. But I'd love for you to just take everyone through exactly how you were able to create this really unique body of work.
Yeah,
Can
of
you take us
course.
through your process?
So there is a lot of elements involved in it, and I have started documenting a lot of them in my Patreon. So these are some quick images of the process for actually making a mask before I even photograph or document anything, which would be to create the shape with clay and create a mold using fiberglass or plaster, and then you will do the silicone casting, which would just give the final product. And then lastly, I'll just paint the mask depending on what the design is like. So this particular project was inspired by a photo series that I did in 2018 with photographer Vasu Vu. So something about the series always really inspired me, and I really wanted to recreate this, but having the advantage of the AI with it, because it was a very easy way for me to explore different shapes of masks and things like that. So I organized a COVID-friendly shoot with one of my flatmates, photographer Sandra Ebert. We made some recreations of the original, let's say, series, and I edited some of them on Photoshop just to give them like a very quick, rough. Like I wanted the AI to have as many variations of bodies as possible to take references from. Note that, for example, here, I really liked how I put colors on some of the bodies on purpose to trace, similar to how, for example, when people do gene editing, they put colors in specific genes to trace which offsprings have like adopted which gene. And I thought this process was quite similar because you can see the final images, how some of them echo these colors from different bodies that I fed in, and you can see them crossbreed and how different bodies are actually parts of all this, like all the different parts that I input in. Then I put all my edits into all of these edits in Playform. I
And
think it was 30 images.
did you upload into the Playform?
Sorry.
How many images did you end up uploading in to train the AI?
30. So I think I had 50 or no, sorry, I had 5 original ones from the 2018 shoot, and then I made 25 to 30 new ones. And then this generated, I think, 60 outputs, which I really liked. Which then I went on editing on Photoshop to kind of enhance them. And then I took 50 of them along with the 30 originals, and I fed it again for a second generation of outputs, which I then edited again to create I edited and then inputted it again to create a third generation of outputs, which were like, I think in the end were 130 images I was working with. So the longest time I spent on this project, I think, was on Photoshop, kind of collaging all the different images together, making sure that all the levels and all the colors, highlights are there. I went through 25,000 images altogether and slowly canceled some which I didn't like and took elements of others which I really enjoyed. And like it was like a slow process of like working on 5 at a time, 5 at a time, 5 at a time. And yeah, in the end, slowly there was a selection, and we ended up with 111 portraits.
And why did you pick 111? Just out of curiosity.
I really like I feel like the angel number. There was quite something really satisfying with having 111. Originally, we were talking about having 100, but because it was just so hard to cut them down, there were just so many options and so much potential. I thought the more the better, and 111 really sounded like the number.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool that there's kind of that reference point. So after seeing all of this, I'm really curious to understand. Now in hindsight from this experience, what do you think is the AI's role in artwork? And how do you think artists should think about AI in regards to incorporating AI into their process and into their art?
So I found that the strength of AI for me was that it just boosted the experimentation process so much. And I would have not, like, it would have taken me so much time to physically experiment and try out all these decisions, which some of them I maybe not even would have done because we have a bias, but the AI doesn't have a bias. It will just try everything for you, and you will have a huge library of your own imagination, really, because the inputs are yours and the outputs will echo, all your choices. So I think there's so much power in just being able to visualize things so quickly, especially with attention span becoming shorter and how much content we are always made to absorb. And I don't know, it feels like maybe if things are quicker, it actually would help us more. It would help us more. And maybe we do need, like, why would speed actually affect us? I found that curating and all the creative aspects of choosing the elements to bring together to like have the eye for the colors to be correct, all these details, uh, there still is the artist is making them, and like you're still so much part of the work, and the work is so much dependent on you. But the AI is definitely a very cool tool, I think, to use for experiment and design.
Yeah, and I think, particularly in this iteration of AI with machine learning and with the GAN, with the generative adversarial networks, which act as training the AI. It really matters, who's training the AI. It's not the AI that's really functioning on its own, but it's really following what you're teaching the AI.
Yeah.
So
And I also found that like you get almost like fluent in it, and you get to have like you learn what it needs to produce the best content. And by the time I was doing the third generation of training, it was like the outputs didn't even need editing in the end, because I just knew exactly how I was supposed to be having all the inputs. And you really do learn how to create with it and play to like really get the best out of it, if that makes sense.
yeah, that's why we call it Playform. So your work references natural and biological formations. As you mentioned, you've really found nature to be kind of a place that you can escape and be free, and it's been really incorporated into your work. So, how has the digital manipulation and AI either enhanced or disrupted how you think about your work in terms of natural influences?
So I found that the like to me the way the AI worked was so organic, because like we said, GAN technology is like echoes so much how nature self-assembles, self-expands, self-grows, and learns through just like almost like trial and error all the time, and mutations. um, and there's obviously like in, let's say, in in like evolution in nature, there is all this environmental environmental things that kind of curate an evolution of a body and what a body can become. It felt like in this AI, I fed them all my work references organic and like shapes and things that have existed on Earth already. So in a way, they could be biologically accurate. And when I fed the AI and this biologically almost accurate bodies, I feel like there's nothing to curate this like this evolution. It's infinite, and that's why it gave me so many options, and I could create 111 portraits in 1 month, which by myself that would have been like impossible. um, but then it does feel like it feels like you're just feeding something and then it just evolves. It's creativity. How can creativity be organic? I don't know. um, I think I had so many thoughts about where does nature finish, where does technology begin. um, and I have found a very cool quote by um, I think it's Harway, which said, "Technology is not neutral. We're inside what we make, and it's inside of us. We're living in a world of connections, and it matters which ones get made and unmade." And I think, I don't know, this kind of echoes it so much, how you can create evolutions of a body by putting inside bodies, but then exist in this dimension of AI and like digital representation.
Yeah, I think really watching you do your process, it was very clear that there was just something so organic about how you went about using AI. And we've often referenced the fact that it feels a lot like being God, having the power to create and then kind of curate and decide and
Yeah,
really
who's gonna
manipulate.
go forward? Who's gonna breed? Who's gonna pass on the genes? Gonna go to the second generation?
As well as, there's kind of like a level of Darwinism to it where like you also felt like you were classifying and categorizing and
Mhm.
grouping, what already existed. And so I think there was definitely just kind of the whole spectrum of how you might interpret nature in your work, is particularly in this series. I just also want to remind everybody you can add questions now to the chat. We just have a couple more questions we'll be going through, and then we'll start answering the audience questions. So I'm going to now jump into the exhibition and how we decided to display it. And for all of you out there, if you go to playform.io/anthromorph right now, you'll see that we've made this work available for sale through one-of-a-kind prints. We're only going to be printing each one once. And that will be verified through blockchain. And so if you buy one of these pieces, and they've been priced very affordably because Anthromorph insisted that she wanted her fans to be able to access this work. So you'll find that they're affordably priced. They're one of a kind. We will never print another. And also, there's also these collectible card packs that we've decided to make available to as part of this series as well. And that was really inspired by, during this process, you referred to this new body of work as a Pokédex,
Mhm.
referencing Pokemon. Why do you think this format and presenting your work is integral to the exhibition's narrative?
Mhm. So I feel like we've said before how there's so many Gen Z references in my work, in like previous dialogues that we had, and like it's kind of true that so much of I have a lot of admiration for creature design in video games and in collectible sets. People that create it's almost like world building. In a very interesting way that you can interact with these creatures and you can be in this world. um so yeah, Pokemon and like Yu-Gi-Oh, all these monster creatures were like big references from my childhood, really, and I'm sure a lot of people from my following also agrees. And from the beginning, when I started teasing them on my story and stuff, people would say that they want to catch them, they want to collect them all and things like this. So I also felt like they really had to represent it as a family and as something that is like it's the AI really allowed us to just open this portal in this universe and just show all the possibilities. So I think I wanted something that could encompass everything but still maintain this. It's like easy, it's digestible, and it's futuristic, and it's a bit more accessible, maybe.
Yeah, I'm sure the Pokemon creators are looking right now going like, oh my gosh, I wish I had AI. It would have been so much easier to create all these creatures.
Mm,
Um,
I hope that
so
yes.
yeah, I mean, and I just want to say, like, these cards look so cool. Yeah, it's definitely it feels like a more adult version of the Pokemon.
They're all
Um,
feminine, celestial. So I designed all of them on InDesign, which so I designed the layout for these cards as well.
yeah, it's really cool. And if you look up close, you'll see that you've actually named some of these as well. So
Yeah, all of them have an idea of what which number of the deck is basically, and what every creature has like a very specific ID to it.
yeah, I love it. So my last question before we move on to the audience questions is Instagram has been your top platform for exhibiting your work. And I think that the way you've used Instagram, it's been really a dialogue between you and your followers. How do you think being able to connect to your followers and the larger Instagram community has played a role in your art practice?
So my work was from the beginning it was about embodiment and what embodiment felt to me, or my exploration of embodiment when I was the most dissociative in my life. That's kind of how it was birthed. Um, so like I grew up in like a very conservative environment, and like I had no ability to be visibly queer or actually experiment with uh, behaviors that I was interested in and all those things. So I was very suppressed on the physical realm, but on the cyber world, you can a lot of people have access to queer embodiment experimentation, let's say, through cyberspace and through being on Tumblr, through being on social media. Um, so for a long time, the only place I could explore my queerness was on Tumblr, which kind of really shaped and socialized me, I would say. Uh, More than my physical environment really ever did, because it was just so um, just very conservative, let's say. So I'm very familiar how online existence, let's say, or cyber performativity can have a real impact on it really has its own dimension, and it has a very strong emotional impact, a very strong um, um, it's like it feels like you are socializing. It has opened a dimension of our social bodies, which just exists there as a library. And I want to take advantage of that, because Instagram has undeniably become this like the most, let's say, legitimate form of social media, where you just present your face and your body. Um, so I thought that was the perfect tool for me to use to distort what the normal what is a body on cyberspace, and then you take that into what is a body in the real, in like the physical realm in general. Because online you have access to this, like digital manipulation, all those elements which you don't have in the physical world, and you're constrained by, so your expression there can be anything. And yeah.
Yeah, you're not concerned by physics. I think that's been a big part of kind of how you see the world, right? Like, I think there's the physical world that essentially you're kind of stuck in, whereas there's the digital world in which you kind of are able to rise above anything that has been frustrating you in the physical world.
Yeah, and it does have like it really challenges, I think. It can really challenge, I think, what the perception of an identity is. And in a way, it has this entity now, it really exists as its own thing, and people will perceive it. It has able to build. It's really fascinating to me how it has managed to build relationships with people online, and how it has managed to um, make people question, what is a form, what does something really need to be relatable and be perceived as something as important as me. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And speaking of all your wonderful followers and fans out there, I'm going to now switch to some of the questions that they've been sharing in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
So Alexander asked a question about your process, the medium and software, but since we went over that, I'm going to skip this question, go on to the next one from Alicia. So she asks, you mentioned queerness and body dysphoria. Can you talk more about artists in these categories that inspired you, and how you came to wanting to make work about this artistically?
Mm-hmm.
And just to kind of follow up on that, would you consider your work to be a part of queerness or the grotesque?
So one of my like really early inspirations was Salvia on Instagram, because I think she was one of the first people that were really using Instagram as a platform to challenge human embodiment, um, and was taking advantage of this like the social cyber dimension for that purpose. I would say that my work is like I love playing with the like this idea of the grotesque and the object, and really repulsing people to look at me, because I, I think as a queer person, I had to face, like, you have to face a lot of inner feelings of monstrosity and self-disgust and all those things. And to me, kind of overcoming them and kind of having to be gentle to this monstrous idea that I had of myself was really important. And yeah, that's also why I love, like, a lot of times I joke about angels and things like that. I think this idea of being not afraid of an angel, which is like highest pure, and like such a pure energy, let's say, yeah, such a pure energy would approach you and would scare you. I quite like challenging people to really maintain like an open heart, I would say, to something that could be very grotesque and weird.
Mhm.
um, but I also think,
And
I don't
what
know.
is, what is grotesque, right? Like, I think that is also a subjective, um, you know, to
Yeah,
one person, something might be grotesque, and to someone else, that might be beautiful.
exactly. And it's interesting to just like break these binaries between nature and the like human body and nature. In our genes, we carry histories of all forms we have evolved from, and we are so intertwined as beings.
Yeah, and actually, I want to jump to another question from Fran, which I think takes this conversation further. How do you think AI will impact the concept of gender and gender identity? And just a little shout out. Fran is from Chile and calls herself a Chilean creature. So
Well, um, hmm. I think, like, it will just boost everyone to define how they want to present those things. I don't think the AI will be able to tell us anything about anything on its own ever, and I don't think we're gonna have like a black and white answer for anything. I think what it will do is give ability to people that really want to redefine what gender is, the ability to maybe do it quicker or experiment and do it quicker. So, let's say for this project, I transcended like biology and gender in a way, in my own very specific way, which what's I think that's what gender really is. Everyone an expression. Everyone has like a very specific way they want to express things. Um,
And I think AI allows us to be more, like more complex, right?
mm,
Like you said, AI can kind of cut down a lot of that process so that you can go through more iterations.
yeah,
And if you think about gender in the binary, I feel like that it's very lazy of us to say male and female. It's to make things simpler, right? It's like, okay, like 90 something percent of the people probably fall under the spectrum, like, male or female. So we're just going to be lazy and say that's all there is.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Whereas with technology and with AI and stuff like that, I think we've been able to get more personalized. We're able to get into more, like we can go beyond just two categories. We can really
And it exposes all the all the interconnections and the links. Like, there really isn't even, yeah, there's so many inner connections into anything. Everything is so interconnected.
Mhm. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question. So, as to an average art enjoyer, which are your favorite picks you made?
From, I wonder if that's from
That was
all
from
my work.
Victor.
Sorry.
That was from Victor.
And is this from, like, I wonder if this is just from this series or from all my work in general. But my favorite work from this series is the profile picture I have on Zoom right now, which is the number one, the number one Anthromorph on this deck. Um, and I think my favorite app from all the time is the mask that I made that has the big red frills, because it was just like a very dream of mine from young to have this like dragon, the dragon frills. I think it's such an iconic animal shape.
Yeah. Another question from Ciara is I'm a British student who studies photography. How do you think a fellow creative can incorporate AI into their practice?
I think you can just take a bunch of pictures and throw them in, and you can experiment to see which kind of compositions you like. You can experiment to see what colors. It will just give a combination of whatever you feed it, and then you can see how all these elements work together in a million different ways. So I think just think how you can use it about experimentation. And I didn't really went into this project with thinking about a final image in mind. It was more about just experimenting and playing every time, and it kind of the project just came up on its own.
Yeah, and I mean, just kind of watching these flip through the screen, it's just really amazing, some of the outputs here. And then Sierra, I will say, try Playform. That's a really easy way to get started with AI. So now I'm going to ask another question from John. How do you feel that our heritage also echoes in our art? Oh, that's a really great question.
Mhm. Um, is that from meaning heritage, Greek heritage?
Yeah, and yeah, your Greek heritage. How do you think that that comes through in your art and how you think about
Mm,
art?
yeah, I was very like growing up around all the temples and all the or like all the mythologies and seeing all the creatures. It was definitely very fascinating for me in the way how to I was imagining bodies. It was I always had centaurs around me and all this, all this like monsters with like hundreds of heads and sirens and things, which like, and I was always just so drawn into. I feel like it just inspired me so much to just always create hybrids. I was really fascinated about that.
Mhm.
And I think that in a way has carried into my work now, but I'm doing it. I think I would like to, I'm trying to do it in a way that it's like detaches from, let's say, the Greek aesthetic so much and re reshapes a very like fleshy fleshy hybrid creature.
So, and this kind of also is about this, but when Sarah asks, when you're creating, are you connecting to your higher self purpose, and what is that like coming to into that realization?
That's a very interesting question. I definitely think my highest inspiration feels almost spiritual sometimes, or feels like there is like a higher self present, not presence, but it feels like you're entering an ethereal version of you when, especially because a lot of those elements are transcending the body digitally, which I think has this like ethereal like element to it.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, it
yeah,
worked to me. It feels so much like therapy. I feel like, especially with your dysmorphia and all of that, and the way that you create, there's such a freedom and escapism. I can only imagine it's very therapeutic to be able to kind of transcend the way you do.
yeah, and I think that's why the work has become like all the work I've done so far regarding Anthromorph has been created so organically because it was never work I was designing necessarily for like for a brief. It was always instinctive releases, and it just I feel like when you're able to kind of tap into the very specific feelings that you feel and the very specific way that you perceive the world and find a way to communicate that, I think that's when we can communicate like you can tap into these very unique and special ideas.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that's what art should be about, right? It should be less forced. It should be really about expressing.
Yeah.
Um, so Alexander asked, at what point did you decide this is the kind of art projects you want to pursue? And so I think we just kind of answered that, right? Your process is really more about instinct. What do you want to express, not like what do I create today because it's Wednesday, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm gonna follow this up with I'm gonna Tony asks about your inspiration, and I think we talked a bit about that earlier on. There's been a lot of questions, so I'm just gonna keep skipping through. Um, Cumbria, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. What a cool name. Where were there any limitations to the platform AI that you encountered? And if so, did you manage to work your way around them?
Mm, yeah, so I think the limitations would be that um, like a lot of the outputs, if you saw uh, while in the slide that I was just selecting them, uh, like out of the 25,000 images, you have to go through a lot of searching sometimes to really, I mean, actually no, it's not a lot of searching because there were just so many, like there's so many elements that I liked. It was more about having the stamina to go through all these images and kind of consume, it's like a lot of images that you have to consume and be able to keep up with making the choices that you want to make. So I found it a bit hard at times to continue, like really push myself to work. Not really, like I think sometimes you could get just tired of the having to how much the selection was affecting it, let's say. But I think that was because my goal was to make 111 portraits, and I also did a lot of training. So I quite enjoyed that part of the difficulty. Um, but it definitely, I feel like it could be something that could be worth keeping in mind.
Yeah, and some people are just talking in the comments about finding your Instagram. It's Anthromorph, and it's one of the O's. The first O is a 0, and so you'll be able to find that on Instagram. I'm gonna actually follow this up with another comment from Cumbria, the same person that just asked the last question. And once again, sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name right. The spelling
No,
looks
that's
difficult
probably.
though. Uh, so your work feels quite transhumanistic, and I was wondering as to how you feel about the slight shift in aesthetics coming out of your use of AI, from quite biologically fluid, previously an animalistic primitive, to this new digitally generated look through the use of AI. And I think it brings up connotations of forms of cyborgs, and I wondered on your thoughts of this. And actually, this is something we've talked about, right? Like how the AI um, it mimics your work and also kind of adds a little to it, right? So I think that's what she's getting at
I mean,
here.
it gives you all the other options that you would maybe be afraid to explore yourself. A lot of these elements I wouldn't do by myself. I wouldn't really add color. Like I'm surprised that so many of them are so colorful and are so um, there's in a lot of them such a separation from humanness. And a lot of them I wouldn't really be brave to do. Like a lot of these tasks I wouldn't have been brave to do by myself.
Mhm.
um, and I love that the AI gave me the ability to do that. At the same time, um, I do think that when you're creating work by yourself, you're gonna go to your like let's say like top 5 references or top 10 references that you really like, which maybe that's why physical work that you make by yourself will be a bit more limited and a bit more limited in references, let's say. But this one is so infinite that there is no reason to be limited by any amount of references. It will just do as much as you feed it in, the more it just will just give you, and the more it will expand. um, so I think this project just pushes their designs to the max, but I know that I wouldn't really make some of them necessarily myself, which that's why I love this project so much, because it just opens my own dialogue and my own mind in a way that was kind of hidden to me before. And I'm so happy to have absorbed so many references.
Victor asked a question. I love the fleshy vibe. Do you have any tips on how to add textures in Photoshop?
Yeah, so you can use the stamp tool, and you can also, what I do sometimes is just cut pieces of the body that have the best textures from, like, part of the image that it has the best texture, and then you just like take it kind of, um, you're just gonna like delete the edges a bit with and then you can just like, kind of hide it, play with the opacity. Yeah, there's loads of YouTube tutorials. If you ask specific questions, people do so many YouTube tutorials about Photoshop.
And did your work help you decide if you want to transition? That was a question from someone as well.
Yeah, 100%. I was very, very, very confused before, um, like doing Anthromorph, and Anthromorph was like my ever first project, which is on my IGTV. It was like, I think it's called Test 1, 2, and 3. It's like these black and white videos, and they were the first time ever I was performing Anthromorph with no test, or any kind of like there was no really preparation. It was just very DIY on the day. And it has a very like looking back to it now, it kind of it's like such a special memory for me because it shows the first time I was ever, because the anthropomorph mask really breaks away the ability to have the awareness of being perceived, which then helped me to not control how I behaved while I was performing. And like having the ability just opened up for me such a new world to explore, and such a new world of human behavior that I could explore. And it kind of worked as an arc for me to be on while I was really grieving that I had to transition, and that is an option, and that my body can transform into something else if I wanted to. And I just have to kind of like, I kind of used Anthromorph as like a safety net that I could just stay in, or a cocoon, while this new body was being created for me to exist in. And with time, I definitely have found that the way that I attach to Anthromorph has shifted because of how my own bodily awareness has shifted as well, which is quite like, it's really quite fascinating, I think, to me.
Yeah, and I think it all goes really to the theme of this series, as well as, you know, just a lot of what I think your art has been about, which is evolution, right?
Mhm, mhm,
I love that analogy of like anthropomorph is the cocoon, um,
mhm.
and it's part of this transition that you're going through in life.
Yeah,
Um,
because like for a long time in the beginning, it was the only way that I really felt represented. Because my own, like, let's say in quotations, human presentation was just so detached from anything that I wanted. Um, so it was like for a long time, it was the only way that I could feel represented, really.
Um, and then I'm just gonna kind of go into the other direction with a question from Pauline.
Mhm.
What kind of music do you listen to? What inspires you? And I'm assuming while you're working as well, like what kind of music helps kind of bring a lot of this creativity out?
I love music that doesn't have a lot of words, and music that is very like avant-garde electronic, or like has like glitchy celestial vibes. I really like Arca, and I don't know how to pronounce her name ever. Oh, Northrix Point Never, Amnesia Scanner, people like that. Like I love sounds that like sound almost like you're part of like a ritual, or you're exploring a landscape. And they have like yeah, I quite like glitchy music.
And then John asks, would you consider yourself to be a spiritual person? And if it's not too personal, do you have a religion?
Mm, like I really go, I am so torn between everything all the time. So I don't feel like I can identify with anything 100. Like sometimes I feel spiritual and sometimes not as much. And I think it's healthy to main like have a balance between both, and sometimes be very grounded and sometimes connect with like a spirituality. But my sense of spirituality is just very unique to myself and unique to my world perception, and how like just my individual experience kind of has shaped what my need for faith is, let's say. um and I think that's like spirituality should kind of be that, should be a personal undefined thing, and I think I found more beauty in that, maybe.
I love that answer. Yeah, I think I feel like that's how it should be. You're right. I think there should be a balance.
Mhm.
And no, Nush has asked, you talked earlier about world building and mythology. Would you consider developing AI generated creatures into other contexts, physical or digital, or do you think they work best as standalone portraits presented in variations on a theme? So I guess they're asking about where you're going to take this next.
Uh-huh. So I would love to see how an AI could generate like 3D forms, if that could ever be possible.
Mhm.
And but also I tried to experiment with full body imagery for this project, and so I can have like a balance of both full body and just portraits. But unfortunately, the full body ones were just a bit too different from each other. to really, so the AI can really create coherent forms, you really need to, like, I found that you really need some specific elements that echo in all the image, all the input that you gave them to have like a coherent form in the end. And so that's why I focus mainly on portraits, because that's kind of like, that was like the best way to take advantage of the AI, for me, and the way, yeah.
Yeah. By the way, someone just had a really, a couple of comments about your music recommendations. And someone made a suggestion that you should make a playlist. So I agree with that.
I have been thinking, but I am so strict about curating it. So like it will have to be like very, very perfect. And I don't know when that will ever happen.
And let's stay in touch about that too, because actually Playform, we're working on some features around syncing music to art.
Mhm.
Um, so maybe that could be a collaboration with us as well down the line. Kind of playing with some AI music
That would be really cool.
and AI art at the same time. So now I'm gonna start wrapping this up. I also just wanted to mention that a lot of the fans out there have been wishing you well on your GoFundMe, and have been asking about that as well. And that's something that you can address in your Instagram. Kind of just
Thank you
thank you
so
to everybody
much.
for their thoughts.
Thank
So I'd
you.
let you know people care. Your fans are so nice. These are such great questions.
They are, yeah, I cannot believe how wholesome they are. Like people are sometimes. It's very, it's
Yeah,
like,
right? Like, when you're so vulnerable on the internet, you would assume that they're, like, I think especially in the last few years, we've seen such ugliness on social
yeah.
media, and you just wanna shut it off. But, you know, I think just kind of looking at what your fans are bringing to the table today, it's just restored my faith in the internet.
Like I am so grateful, and it, like I always get so touched, and I don't think I can ever really express how it feels to have this relationship with everyone.
Yeah, no, everyone's just like, "Oh, like, wish you the best. You're the best. You're hot.
Yeah.
You're great." Like, it's just really cool. And some of the other questions, Playform does have a platform. Our website is playform.io. And all of you guys can go in there and start playing. We all new users get $15 in free credits, which gives you 3 hours of training. You can also play around with things like our face mix tool, which lets you upload images and mix them together. And so I think you guys can have a lot of fun. It seems like this is a really creative bunch here. So check that out, playform.io. And then the exhibition where you can buy the cards and the one-of-a-kind prints, that's at playform.io/anthromorph. And we've been putting that into the chat as well. So that just kind of brings me up to thank you for joining us for this artist talk. And as I mentioned, once again, the exhibition is at playform.io anthromorph. I can't say it enough because I want you guys all to check it out. It looks amazing.
There was a
Um,
lot of effort.
yeah, there's 111 unique images and only one per image will be printed for sale. So if you don't get it, it'll be gone. Note that the images will be released in 3 exclusive drops. So the first drop is going to be $45, $50, and $50 US. But each drop is going to actually increase with price. So since you guys are the first to learn about this exhibition, get out there, get your prints, get the cards. You can also sign up to receive email notifications for each drop. And so as we release more and more of these, you'll be able to be the first to know there as well. Also, as I mentioned, you can get the collectible cards. You get 11 per pack, playing with the angel number that Anthromorph just was inspired by with this collection. And each card will be a unique image from this series, and was designed by Anthromorph. So once again, website, playform.io/anthromorph. Thank you all so much for taking the time to join us. Just like so much love in the chat. Anthromorph, if you're not
I
seeing
hope
it,
I can read the chat
I'm gonna,
afterwards.
excuse me?
I hope I can read the chat afterwards, because it's
Yeah,
not
I was
long.
gonna say I'm gonna send you the transcript just because just such beautiful things in here. I just looking at this, I'm telling you, it's restored my faith in the
Oh,
so yeah, thank you so much.
thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure creating this body of work with you.
Yes, it's been so much fun to work with you, Anthromorph, and I just wish you the best. And I'm looking forward to seeing your career and how it evolves. You know, you are definitely a fascinating creature that is always in pursuit of evolution. And I'm just kind of I'm very much in awe of the things that you've been able to express, how vulnerable you've been able to be, and how you've just built such a wonderful community by being authentic. So thank you for being you. Thank you to all the fans for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.